It's hard to know exactly where to get started in describing an entire language, but I think one of the most fundamental building blocks is the concept of a variable. A variable is like a container for data. It has a name and a value. You can create a variable at any time by typing the keyword var followed by the name you want to give the variable. Let's go into the project we've been using and try this out. Again, if this is someone new to you, actually open up your editor and type in what I'm typing. I'm going to clean things up here, remove this button, and move the script tag up to the head, where you're probably more used to seeing it. In the main.js file, I'm just going to delete everything here. At this point, you can say you completely understand everything in this file. My hope is that you'll continue in that state for the rest of the course. First, let's create a variable. I'll just type var message. Now I have an empty variable named message, ready to store some data. Note this semicolon on the end of that line. In JavaScript, every statement is supposed to end with a semicolon. Now let's put some data in that variable. Next line, message equals hello world. You assign data to a variable with the equal sign. This is known as the assignment operator. You put the variable on the left and the data you want to store on the right. The data I'm storing is the text hello world. Anytime you use text in JavaScript, you need to surround it with either single or double quotes. I could have used single quotes here like this. Absolutely no difference. Text surrounded by quotes is called a string in JavaScript. A string is one type of data. It's obviously used for storing text. And you'll learn a lot more about strings later in this lesson. So what can we do with this message variable? How about logging it to the console? I'll type console.log message. So there, I passed a variable instead of a raw string. If I save that, load the page in the browser, and check the console, sure enough it says hello world. Now the name variable implies that the data in the variable can change or vary, and sure enough it can. I'll go back in, and after that log statement I'll change the message to everything changes. And I'll log the message again. Save, reload the page, and check the console. So it shows both messages, great. Now let's change it again. We'll say message equals 101. Here I've assigned a number to the message variable. Numbers are another data type in JavaScript. Generally, you just type the digits of the number, no quotes. I can log that again with the same log statement and check the console, and it still works as expected. But this brings up a very important point. In JavaScript, any variable can hold any data type. The message variable doesn't care if it's assigned a string, a number, or anything else. The last data type I'll tell you about right now is Boolean. This is a value that can be either true or false. So I can say message equals true. Note that I didn't put any quotes around that. It's not a string. It's not text. True and false are special words in JavaScript and can just be typed as is. Again, I'll be covering a lot more about these three data types I just mentioned later in this lesson, but for now it's enough that you know they exist. So we can log that, and sure enough, it logs true. Okay, so now you know how to create variables and how to store information in them, and even a little bit about how to use them. The act of creating a variable is also known as declaring a variable. A shortcut that's very often used is to declare a variable and assign it at the same time. I'll clear all this out and redeclare message and assign it some data at the same time. So if you know what data a variable is going to hold when you declare it, you can save yourself a line of code. Now say you were making some kind of registration page for a site. You'd probably want several variables to hold the various bits of data about the person who's registering. So you might make a few variables like this. That's fine, but there's another shortcut you can do here. You can just use the var keyword once, and then list all the variables after it, separated by commas. Usually, to make this more readable, people put each variable on a new line, indented to line up like so. Note that the semicolon still goes on the end of all that. You can also assign data here as well. You can assign data to all the variables, or none of them, or any combination. Here I've assigned strings to the first and last names, and I've left age empty. That's all good. You can then assign age later. Now that you have multiple variables, you should know that you can log multiple variables. Just list them with commas inside the console.log function. And here in the console, you can see that those three values are logged all in one line. The last general thing I want to tell you about variables is how to name them. Rule number 1, a variable must begin with an uppercase letter, a lowercase letter, an underscore, or the $sign. The rest of the characters in the name can be any of those same characters or numbers. So all of these are valid variable names. And these are not. Technically, there are other special characters that you can use, but people usually only use them when they're trying to be cute or impress someone. Rule number 2, variables cannot have the same name as reserved keywords in JavaScript. JavaScript has a list of words that it uses for the language itself and has reserved a few more for possible future use. You can't use those as variable names. You can find a list of reserved keywords here. Now, those are the only hard and fast rules. If you don't follow them, your code may crash or not run at all. The next rule is really just a convention or best practice. Rule number 3. Generally, variables are named with what we call camel case. This means that they start with a lowercase letter. Single-word variables are composed of all lowercase letters, and variables that contain multiple words like first name or day of month have the first letter of each subsequent word capitalized. Now, some developers use underscores to separate words like this. This is valid, but it's far less common. Finally, the last rule is really just a suggestion in common sense, but it needs to be stated. Rule number 4. Use variable names that actually mean something, and don't abbreviate when it will make the meaning unclear. Someone else may eventually need to read and understand your code someday. That someone may be you, months after you wrote it. A single-letter variable name like f or even fn may leave you scratching your head wondering what it's for, whereas first name leaves no question. Vague variable names like thing or data, or even num for numbers and str for strings, seem better, but they're really just as meaningless as single-letter variables. Now, before I go any further, I'll be showing you a lot of small examples in the rest of this lesson. It would be a bit annoying to constantly switch back to the code window, type in some code, save it, switch back to the browser, reload, and check the console. So I'm going to start using a shortcut. Let's open the console here and take another look at it. Down here you see a greater than arrow with a blinking cursor. That is a command line prompt where you can enter JavaScript statements and they'll be executed immediately, and any results would be displayed right there. For example, I can type var message equals hello world and press enter. Now that prints out undefined, which might make you think that you did something wrong, but you didn't. Whenever you declare a variable, the console is going to say undefined, so don't worry about it. There are other statements that'll do this as well. To verify that you actually did declare and assign a value to the message variable, now type message. And you see that it shows the value you assigned. Typing any variable name will display the value of that variable immediately. Now try typing alert message. And you see the alert box appear with the value of the message. So you can actually run just about any JavaScript statement here. And it's much quicker than using an editor and a web page for testing simple examples like this. Now there are a couple more data types that you should know about: undefined and null. If you see an error in the console and it mentions something not being defined or being undefined, it generally means that you tried to do something with a variable that was either never declared or never assigned a value. Now this can be a timing issue. You're trying to use a variable that hasn't been defined or assigned yet. Quite often, though, it's just a typo. For instance, I've defined a variable called message already, but if I make a mistake and spell it massage, the console is going to give you an error saying that massage is not defined. However, if you declare a variable with that name, but don't assign it a value, and then check that, there is no error, but it will tell you that it's undefined. Now the null value is similar to undefined. Null also means no value, but in JavaScript it's generally purposely assigned. Sometimes you declare a variable and you don't have a value for it yet, but you don't want to leave it undefined, so you can say massage equals null, and then check that. Okay, now you know what variables are, and we're ready to take a bit of a deeper dive into some of the different variable types and the kind of operations that you can do with them. We'll start with numbers and booleans.